Hey everybody, this is Cad Roll Hunter, and today we've got pennies, and today we've got 33 rolls and a little bit, and I'll tell you more about that in just a second. Hi everybody, this is James, and you're watching my channel, Cad Roll Hunter, and that's right, I have pennies. This time I've got 33 rolls and a little bit here. I don't usually hunt this many. I usually do 20 rolls at a time, partly because it's hard for me to get a lot of pennies. We can't really do a full box hunt here as often, or at least not in my area. But this time I've got this sort of odd number because my buddy Jim, who's in Kitchener, Ontario, put a call out on Facebook saying, hey, does anybody have any need for pennies? Of course, I responded really quickly. And when I talked to him, he still had them, which was great. I guess he tried to take them to the bank, but he didn't have any rollers and they wouldn't accept them. So I said, I have some rollers. So I arranged to get him some rollers. I've got some pennies. They're all lined up. So what Jim was doing, for many years, he was just saving all of his pennies and putting them in the piggy bank, penny jar, and didn't spend them and was going to take them all back to the bank when he had a lot. Now, pennies have been out of circulation for about 10 years now in Canada, thereabouts. Last year they were minted was 2012. So he's got a wide assortment of pennies here. I'm looking at some enders, and we've got some copper, we've got some zinc or steel. I don't know if we're going to find anything really, really old. This is not a collection. This is just pocket change. So what I'm actually hoping to see, we might find some older stuff for sure. What I'm hoping to see is maybe some of the harder to come by modern coins, like the 2006. There's some versions that are magnetic or not magnetic. 2007, there's some more rare ones. So we're going to see. So these haven't been searched. They're not a collection. They're just run-of-the-mill pocket change, just what anybody would have in their piggy bank. But maybe we'll find something interesting. But before we go too far, I got something under the scope here. I got a 1950 dime. Every time I go to the grocery store, I always check the return tray in the Coinstar machine, and I've never found anything of interest until today, just before I went to film this. I got myself a 1950, 80% Canadian King George VI dime. So I'm going to take that as a good luck sign for this hunt here. Now we're doing pennies. Who knows what we might find in here? So let's get cracking. Partway through the first roll here, and I am separating out all of the copper into the copper cup here. And I've got my first example of a coin we want to look at. This is a 2003, and it is the P composition mark. Now, the P composition mark means that this would be a steel core coin that should be magnetic. There is a version where the 2003 had the P composition mark, but is not magnetic, was actually made of zinc. So that's one of the ones I'm going to be checking. Now, this is magnetic, so that's just a common one. What we want to do is check all of our 2003 Ps and see if we can find the non-magnetic version, which would be fairly rare and would be an incredible find. Same roll, I've got a 1969, and you know I'll be checking all of my 69s to see if they have any of the doubling on the date. So I pulled this one up, and it absolutely doesn't. I'll also be looking for my 78, 79, 68, 69s. Some of the 70s, 1970s also might have some doubling. So I'm going to check all of those. If I find anything cool, I will show those to you for sure. They're fairly common. They're just die deterioration doubling. It's not true doubling, but they're really interesting to find. I love to find them, so I'll be looking for all those too. Still in the first roll, and we have found our first 1963. It's our first laureate portrait of the hunt, and you can see it's got a lot of mint luster close to the queen there, but otherwise is mostly brown. But that is a good start. We've got our first really good find. Roll number 3 is going to give us our second laureate portrait of the bunch, and it is a 1964. I have another 2006, and it has no mint mark, no mint logo, no composition mark. And so these would mostly be zinc, but there are some that are steel and would be magnetic. That's what we're looking for, and that's not it. Same roll, we've got our first 1985, so of course we want to throw that under the scope and see if it is the blunt 5 or the pointed 5. We're looking at the top of the 5. This is the common blunt 5. I've got a 2010 here. All of the 2010s in circulation were copper-plated zinc. They've got the mint logo on the obverse, so they weren't magnetic. But some pennies were minted with the steel planchet and plated in copper. And so they would have the same appearance, but would be magnetic. And those would also be, well, I'm not sure about their rarity, but they were only in sets and weren't intended for circulation. And of course, this is just the common zinc circulation variety. So that's one I always check too, is to see if we might have gotten one that found its way out of a set and into circulation. Roll number 4, we're going to have our third laureate portrait penny here. We'll see what it is. It is a 1964 again. Same roll, and I've got a 2007 here. And all of the 2007s carry the Royal Canadian Mint logo below the Queen. And almost 1 billion of these were minted out of steel, and so they'd be magnetic. But about 10 million, a little shy of 10 million, were made out of zinc and would be non-magnetic. And so we always want to check for that. And this is the magnetic one that we find quite frequently. But we want to look and see if we can find any of those 2007 zinc non-magnetic in here, because that's a great find. And I don't actually think I even have one, crazy enough. So maybe in here. Second last coin of that roll, it's reverse facing, so we can see the date right away. It's a 1959 laureate portrait. That's our oldest of the hunt so far, a 50s penny in the piggy bank. Roll number 5, and we are going to get our first King George VI. It's a 1945. We can see it right there, sitting pretty for us. So that is a great find in here. I really wasn't sure what we would find in the piggy bank rolls here. But my friend Jim is not a collector, and he wasn't picking anything out anyway. So if these are just circulating or were circulating at the time he put them in the jar, he would have just thrown it in there without really thinking too much about it. But that's a great find for me. Another 1945 saved from the melting pot. Same roll, I've got a 1979 under the scope. And when we take a closer look here, we can see that we've got one of those doubled varieties, the double 979 it appears to be. If I give it a bit of a rotation, you can start to see where the doubling is. It's clearer on the last 9 and the 7, but you can see that that die deterioration is evident around the 9 here. So that's a good little find. It's in pretty awful condition. It's not looking great, but I'll set it aside. That is a little find for our board here. Roll number 6, we've got another older Elizabeth. This time, it's another 1963. Same roll a little further back, we're going to have another older Elizabeth, this one older than the last. This one is our first 1957 of the hunt. Roll 7 gives us another 1964. Roll number 8, we've got another laureate portrait. This is our 9th, so we're averaging a little bit better than 1 per roll. This is another 1964, so that's better than I thought we would be doing. And if we averaged 1 per roll for this entire hunt of 33 and a bit rolls, I think that would be awesome. Roll number 10, we've got our first centennial penny with the rock dove from 1967. So we'll check to see if it's got any of the doubling on the legend on the reverse Canada 1867, 1967. And of course that double die obverse that I found a bunch of in another coin roll hunt. I'll put a link up in the top for you so you can find that, but we'll check this guy. So definitely no doubling on the reverse, and we'll flip it all around, and we want to look particularly at Regina, and we see it pretty prominently around these the serifs for sure, but I don't see any of it here. This is going to go in the copper cup. Just at the end of roll number 10, and we've got ourselves a 1959. Roll 11, we got something here. Let's flip it over and see what we got. It's another 1964 with a bunch of gunk on it. And just 3 coins later, we've got another find here, and let's see what this one is. Again, 1964. 1964 is a very common year. It is the most likely candidate that we're going to find when we're looking at a laureate portrait coin. As you can see by my hunts, that's the one we find the most often. Roll 12, and we've got our first American coin. It is a zinc cent. It's a 1998 out of Philadelphia. Just at the end of roll number 12, we've got our first 1961 of the hunt. We're just at the end of roll number 14, and we're going to have another King George VI. It is a 1943, and so that is a pretty good find right there. Again, I wasn't really expecting to find anything really old. It's not in great shape, but it's a 1943, and we'll take it. Roll 16, another laureate portrait find. This time it is a 1962. And we'll just check this for a couple of varieties. So I've got the 62 under the scope, and it's going to be hard in this condition to see if it had that die clash, the hanging two. We would see basically an impression of the Queen's neckline here dangling down towards the two. The other thing we can look for on the 62s is what is called the guitar or the harp. There's like what appear to be strings running down from the one to the leaf. We don't have that here, but a really interesting variety to check for. Same roll, I got another 1979 here with some doubling. Not really well defined, but there's doubling you can see on the 9, at the base of the 7, and then again on the 9 you can see a little bit here and a little bit here. So that's the double 979. I've got a 1978 here, actually a pretty nice one. And when I put it under this scope, we can actually see that it's got a bit of that doubling. And this is where you can really see that it's a deterioration. If I sort of rotate it around, you can see the doubling at the base of the 7 and the 8, but it's really just as these 8s, I don't know if they were over polished or deteriorated or what exactly happened, but you can see that doubling there. This is a nicer example than some of the ones that we've found, so that's a good one to set aside. That's the double 7-8. Roll 17, we're pretty much at the halfway point, and I bring you in because we've got another older Elizabeth laureate portrait, and this one, if I flip it over, is a 1958. I think that's our first 58 of the hunt. Roll 18, we've got our first 1965, so we'll check it under the scope for one of the 4 major varieties. So first off, we can tell right away this is going to be one of the common varieties. This is the blunt 5. The pointed 5 is far more acute on the end here. And then we want to check to see if it's the small bead or the large bead. Okay, here we're looking at the legend on the obverse on Regina. And we can see that the A is basically pointing between 2 smaller beads here. So this is the small bead variety. So blunt 5, small bead is what we've got here. Roll 19, another older find. And we have found ourselves a 1957. Same roll, just a little further back. We got another one. This time, it's a 1961. Just into roll number 21, and we are going to have our oldest penny of the hunt. It's a 1942. It's our third King George VI. Same roll, and it looks like Elizabeth wants to join the party too. We've got a 1964. Roll 23 is going to give us another oldie. It's a 1951. This is King George VI. And that one's still got a fair amount of detail. That looks like a pretty decent coin. A great find here from the piggy bank. Roll 24 is going to have a pretty circulated Queen Elizabeth II laureate portrait. This one, a 1956. I've just laid out roll number 25 here. And if you're wondering how I know what to look for or what you can look for, I'll admit I've got a little cheat sheet that's just on my screen all the time, just showing me the sorts of things that I'm looking for. But all of my information comes from a few sources. I use the coinsincanada.com website, and I use the Charlton Standard Guide to Canadian Coins. And between those two, that you can find a lot of information on the errors and varieties. I'll have links below for you to find those resources so that you can use those to inform your hunts. Roll 26, we've got one that looks pretty circulated and pretty grungy. And this one's a 1962, followed right behind by a really nice looking 2010. And this is one I mentioned earlier. I think that I always check the 2010s to see if it might be magnetic, to see if it's one that came out of a set, but not that guy. And just at the back of that roll, we got ourselves a 1950 King George VI. That is a great one too. Roll number 28, we've got ourselves another 1962. This will be our third of the hunt. And halfway through that same roll, we're going to find another one. This time, it's a 1957. Roll number 29, pretty circulated like most of these are. It's another laureate portrait. This one is another 1964. Roll number 30, we're getting down to it here, and we got another oldie at 1951. It is a King George VI. That's another great little find there. And behind it in 1968, not one we'll keep, but definitely one we will put in the Copper Cup. Roll 31, we've got a 1958. It's got an interesting patina on it. It's kind of reddish brown, I suppose, and not in the coin sense, just in really the coloring. But that's another 50s Queen Elizabeth for the stack. I'm in the last roll, roll number 33, and we've got a little stack of some loose change here we'll go through with these here. But I'm going to have something that is not a Canadian penny, and I don't immediately recognize it, so we'll look at it. Ah, it is 1 cent from the Barbados. We'll flip it to see what it is, and it's a 2008. So interesting, nice and shiny on this side, but pretty dull on this side. But we'll take it. That's a foreign find that's not an American, and we've only found 2 US cents here, and I know my buddy Jim has family in the States, so I have a feeling he pulls all of his US change, and when he goes down there, he's got spending money. But in this case, and those, I guess, just slipped through, but we got a foreign 1 cent from the Barbados. I'll look through the rest of these, including the little stack of loose stuff here, and we'll come back with a wrap-up if we don't find anything else. Just at the end of this loose stack of coins, and we did find something. We got one more 1963 laureate portrait. All right, I've laid out all of our finds here. We've concluded that hunt. I'll just highlight I got a couple of cups full of trying to escape copper here. And so I'll roll that up and add that to my copper stack. We know it's worth more than face value, and who knows, precious metals and base metals are all rising these days. So I'm stacking the copper. I got a bunch of steel and zinc cents here. Now, we didn't find any of the rarer varieties that we were looking for, like the 2006 magnetic or the 2006 P low mintage. We didn't get any of that stuff, so that's unfortunate. But we looked at a whole bunch of coins, and if there was one in there, we'd have found it. So we'll take a look at what we did get. We only found 2 US cents. We've got 77 and a 98, so 1 copper and 1 zinc. We found that 1 Barbados cent from 2008, so our other foreign coin. We found a few varieties here. We got a 78, that's the double variety, the double date variety, and a couple of 79s with doubling that we looked at. We ended up with 24 laureate portraits. We got a 56, a few 57s, a couple 58s, a couple 59s, a couple 61s. We've got 3 1962s, 3 63s, and I believe we have, it might be 8 1964s. And then we actually still got some King George VI. I wasn't sure if we'd find any in here, but we got 6 of them. A 42, a 43, a 45, a 50, and 2 51s. And if we take a look at the earlier ones, here is this is the 1942. And we'll see in the obverse here, it says DG Rex, which is King by the Grace of God, and Et ind Imp, and Emperor of India. And of course, that changed in the latter half of that decade. And so if we look at this 1951, that's been replaced. The Et ind Imp is removed because India became independent. So we can see by the obverse if it's an earlier or a later King George VI by the legend. In any case, we had a great time going through my friend Jim's piggy bank and looking to see what we might find in pocket change. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, Cadroll Hunter, please do that now. I've got lots of videos coming out all the time, so we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching.